So this episode's a little bit of a special one, because the camera that we're going to be using for this episode is not made by Codename Gamma or some of the other regulars. No, this one is made by Tribute Games, the very same people that made Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge, which, wow, that's pretty amazing. We're also super fortunate to have Jean-Francois Major, the game's programmer, to hop on as a guest and talk about some of the more obscure and weird things that we found. I'm hyped, so let's not waste any more time and show you what's lurking out of bounds. Let's do it. So we'll start off really strong here with probably the most interesting thing that I found. It's a placeholder sprite that's never seen by the player by normal means, just outside the boundaries of the boss area of level 9. And naturally, I'm going to turn it over to our guest here so he can explain a little bit of the history behind this placeholder. It's so fascinating.
That beautiful placeholder art. So this was actually used really early on in our first prototypes, kind of as, well, not a replacement, but as a first step into having the go sign. So initially the game designers needed to place that object inside the levels, and then they would trigger it with all the waves and whatnot. Eventually, like, we removed that in favor of like having it actually inside the HUD and have a proper way of triggering that instead of having it done kind of like a handmade type of way. Fortunately, it looks like the asset is still inside the game and it's eating all of your memory. But yeah, this was, I believe, done by Fred Jemis, our game designer. And the choice of Raphael is an obvious one. We all know that Raphael is the best turtle, and there's no other better option for this placeholder.
But that's not the only thing that's out of bounds. In fact, in the scene that we've been showing you, you already saw that Crane's body's just kind of hanging out until there's that cutscene where you can see it fly off. But even in the first level, there's two things that you can find that are hanging out of bounds. The first one is Rocksteady, once again doing the same trick as Crane's body. But there's something at the start of the level as well. Not only do I get to show you guys where all the Channel 6 employees go, which is in truth just outside the boundaries, clustered into one spot, and then they disappear, but if you looked very closely, you'd see that this employee is never in that crowd, and she's always stored underneath the boundaries. And then in level 7, Tempestra is stored underneath the boundaries, while Shredder is hanging out at the end of the stage inbounds. What's interesting is that the animation that's used while she's out of bounds is one where she's getting hurt. And in level 6, Wingnut takes Krang's body into the sky at the start of the level, and surprisingly that sprite stays just outside the boundaries the entire level. And funny enough, this includes when you actually encounter Wingnut for the boss fight, which means that there are 2 instances of Wingnut at any given time. Also, I don't know if he ever stops before you go back to the overworld screen, but I will say this: after you defeat Wingnut, if you take the camera really far outside the boundaries, you could see that regardless of how far I took it, Wingnut is forever falling down out of the boundaries. And we'll get back to that in just a second, but first, let's talk about our sponsor today, Skillshare. Now, Skillshare is an online learning community that has classes for the creatives. Whether or not you're in high school or college, Skillshare offers you an opportunity to expand your knowledge with all sorts of subjects like drawing, finance, crafts, film and video. And that's not even close to the end of it. For me, I need help with productivity. I can get things done, but it's sort of like a kicking and screaming type thing. But then I checked out the 21 Days of Purposeful Productivity Forming Habits for Long-Term Goals by Mike Elon. His coaching helped me out a lot and honestly gave me a perspective on certain things I never even thought of before. And the first 1,000 viewers to sign up using my code Shesez will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. That's right, 1 month absolutely free. Pretty awesome stuff. Thank you, Skillshare, and back to the show. And then these smashed windows I just want to talk about real quick are kind of interesting. As you can see, there's various layers that are used here, and even with the broken glass on a layer of its own, the inside of the building is always present. In fact, for this window that never gets smashed at all, if we remove more layers, you can see that the artist put the inside of the restaurant there as well. And here's a piece of unused content. Here with this bush that these Yellowfoot clan members jump out of, if we remove a couple of layers, we can see a backdrop element that I'm pretty sure is never used at any other part of the stage. I'm gonna hand it over to Jean-Francois to let us know what the story is behind this.
So what we're seeing here is a parallax layer. It used to be where you could see in between those buildings there was a little bush, and I see the background kind of scroll a little bit. I believe like we decided to remove that section just to make sure that like the city part of that level was a bit more busy. It was storefronts, and it just made more sense to not see the city skyline. And we kept that parallax for like the later part part of the level when the stage kind of opens up and transitions to the next level.
Also, this screenshot was provided by the team if that background was implemented in the way they first intended. And this is a pretty awesome instance of flipping assets. Earlier in the episode, you could have probably seen that there was a background element of bebop on various television programs and on various TVs. But here at this boss fight, there's only one TV. But if we remove some of the layers here, you can see that the entire texture for all TVs is hidden underneath. They just used one portion of that texture to animate this one television screen for the Rocksteady boss fight. Also, the Yellow Foot Clan members move just outside the boundaries underneath the stage and stay there for the entire boss fight. And here's an example where something out of bounds is completely unseen and never used otherwise. In this vertical part of the game, if you move the camera to the left, you can see that those cars behind the fence are not clipped off in any way, and there's assets to this art that you'd never be able to see, like for example, the sales sign on the purple car and the Tribute Heart logo on the front of each vehicle. And another example of the art team going through the effort of fully realizing some assets, despite the fact that they'll never be seen by the player, are these tigers here. Removing the layer that covers up the tigers can show you that their backs are completely animated. And heck, if we remove the tigers, you can even see that the ground that they lay on is fully realized as well. And although the monkeys aren't hiding as much as the tigers, it's worth it to show you that by removing the layer that has the bars, there are pixels that represent the monkeys in full that get covered up. And honestly, this one really shocked me. In this background here, you can see some leveled ground left behind by Dirtbag, and by removing certain layers, you can see that mound of dirt just disappear, and in its place is a little bit of leftover art for the whole of the fence. It's definitely not common to see the art in this game touched up and re-edited in this sort of way. Also, by removing this layer, you can see the art assets for the crocodiles in full. Another example of a good chunk of art being obscured by a different layer is this apartment building over here, because for the most part it looks like it's covered up by tree leaves, but here you can see that asset in full. Also in the same level you can see this robotic fly down here. This one's stored for after you beat the boss, and a cutscene plays out where it goes and takes the legs of Krang's body. Also, I just want to show you guys the crazy amount of layering used for this box background. Reason being is that it's so hard to see any of these assets, but again, removing the layers and moving the camera a bit can show you a lot more to this art than you would normally get to see. And then for Chrome Dome, there's certain parts of this boss fight where Chrome Dome goes into like a first-person perspective and starts punching you, and although the visor graphic has a little bit more than you would normally get to see, what I found a little more interesting was that removing that layer can show you that the wind-up for the punch starts a lot sooner than you would think, with the fist existing alone first, before extending into a whole arm. And then at various areas throughout the stage where you fight Slash, he's sort of hiding in the background, and he's covered up by a lot of layers. I just wanted to show you what the entire animation looked like without anything covering him up. And this happens in two different instances, so I'll just show you both even though they're pretty much identical. And here's another example where the layers cover up a lot of art assets. I just wanted to show you all the different layers that the game has here. I was really surprised to see that these vats seem to appear to be on a separate layer from the cavernous walls. I get that it's for parallax, but the dedication here is unreal. And then for the Statue of Tyranny, you can see Krang hanging out of bounds, once again making two instances of the boss. But also the sprite for the Statue of Tyranny has a lot more art outside the boundaries, as you can see here. And then for Super Shredder, you can see that he's also got a sprite out of bounds. This one's a damaged sprite, likely meant to play for when you beat the game. But now I gotta pass it off yet again to our special guest here, because I found a purple square. Now I'm sure a lot of you would think that that's not even worth bringing to anybody's attention, but you'd be surprised by the explanation. Here, I'll give you a listen.
I'm actually like really surprised this shows up in the game, because this is really more of an editor feature. When an animated object doesn't actually have anything set up, we actually just draw a purple box just so it's really visible, and also it allows for the graphic design team to actually select that object.
And then later on in the game, you go into Dimension X. Although you warp to it in normal play, Dimension X actually sits above the city, and by manipulating the camera, you can see the border between two worlds. Also, the map works with layers too. You might remember when you start the game, all the roads are unpaved, but even after you pave over the roads, removing the layers will show you that those unpaved roads are still hidden underneath. And I'm sure a couple of you want to know what's inside that tunnel. Well, there's not much to it, but you know, seeing is believing, right? So here you go. Sadly, the turtle van and the tunnel share the same sprite layer, so you wouldn't be able to see the turtle van go through the tunnel, but I imagine there wouldn't be any changes anyway. And now let's talk about one of the most fascinating aspects that I found about this episode. Every single Foot Clan soldier that has a weapon has a separate layer for those weapons, which means that there's animated artwork underneath them. And so if we go through all the different foot soldiers, you can see them essentially holding invisible weapons if we disable the layer that the weapons rest on. And I'm going to assume that the reason for this is that you can equip the foot soldiers with different weapons without having to reanimate the entire sprite. And so maybe in the future with DLC, you might find that some of these foot soldiers are just equipped with different weaponry to save on time and resources. Of course, that remains to be seen, and I don't care to pull that insider information out of my guest. That's just something that we'll have to sit here and speculate for now. But anyways, before you go, I just want to let you guys know that I brought on a new host, and I'm going to be continuing to make 2 videos a month, just as I always have. But now we're going to be alternating every single Friday. So every Friday, stop by the channel, see what's new. There'll be a video uploaded by either me or Snipey, and make sure you hit subscribe just in case you forget to check by the channel. You're going to get a lot more quality content a lot more often and consistently. So hope you join me for that journey. But anyways, thank you to T. Lopes and Jean-Francois for making this episode possible. Oh, this is super last second, but I always offer the developers, whenever they guest, an opportunity to talk to the fans, and T. Lopes, who was the amazing composer for this game, an all-around great guy, offered to step in and leave a message for you guys, the fans. So with that, I hand it off to you, sir.
Hey yo, it's your boy T. Lopes, and I'm here with Shesez of Boundary Break, one of my favorite shows on YouTube, and I just want to say how happy I am with the reception that TMNT Shredder's Revenge has had so far with the fans of the series. Shout out to Tribute Games and Dotemu, you guys were spectacular. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for giving us such a great game. I would also like to thank my musical friends, Johnny Atma, Mega Ran, Anton Caraza, Andrew Wan, Sam Silva. You all did an excellent job. I think your contributions to this soundtrack were priceless, and I couldn't be happier and prouder of what we achieved. Also to the fans, a big thank you for the reception to the soundtrack so far. It's been spectacular, and your support is really important to me, to the rest of the team, and it's just been astounding for us. So thank you for that. What else can I say? Buy the game, buy the soundtrack, play the game with your friends, be happy, be excellent to each other, and cowabunga, dudes.